Tim Brando, friend of the show and firebrand. I don't think he'd mind me calling him a firebrand. I criticized the SEC for avoiding a 9-game schedule and called out Paul Feinbaum for a soft interview with Greg Sankey. I later apologized, but my show appearances stopped. Bottom line, every CFP conference must play the same number of league games. He said that on our show many times on the SEC scheduling controversy. And Craig, we've kind of made our positions clear. I would prefer 9 for everybody, but again, this is one of those things that all the conferences need to get in a room and go, okay, who wants 8? Who wants 9? Let's vote. Whoever wins, that's what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wonder if he could go back in time, because I've seen him mention the Feinbaum appearances now 3 or 4 times. I think that bothers him still. And Tim's our buddy, but I think that bothers him. And then again, he's a man with opinions, so I'm just as confident. I'm 50-50. He probably still would have said what he said, knowing that he wouldn't appear on Feinbaum anymore. I don't know. I don't know what the trade-off looks like in his head, but clearly that's stuck with him, and clearly that's stuck with Feinbaum as well. So whatever. But in the whole thing, the whole reason we're in limbo right now is because we can't agree on the same number of conference games, really. Yeah. I mean, the Big Ten says, hey, we'll do this if you play the same number of conference games. And the SEC says, well, what about this other model? And that's where we are. So, yeah, it's really as simple as we can go a specific direction if the SEC will decide to play the same number of games, and the ACC as well, because I'm tired of this crap not rolling downhill, it just stopping at the top 2 leagues, and it doesn't roll down when it needs to the other leagues. And so the ACC just as guilty. They play 1 less game than everybody else. Just on the overall point, I'm in agreement with him. I understand the scheduling stance of the SEC. I can understand that they put out their propaganda, and that's not even a knock, folks. That was literally propaganda they put out last week. That is propaganda. And so, that's going to be out there, and they're going to be shaping the narrative, and they're also shaping the playoff, but they've got to agree with the Big Ten. And that's the one thing they don't agree on right now, specifically, is the number of conference games. So I'm with Tim on this. I think everybody should play the same. Now, that should also come into play where, yes, strength of schedule should then be factored in at the end of the year. And if you're in the SEC and you play 9 league games, that should probably count a little bit more. I will go back to, okay, but how much are we talking? Does everybody's have a built-in extra 100 bonus points just for simply existing in the SEC? And every schedule's treated as though they all played Bama, Georgia, Texas, and South Carolina 4 weeks in a row?
No, it shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't. So there's got to be a way to determine who actually played a stronger schedule, not just I'm in the SEC, my schedule's stronger than your Big 12 schedule, because that's not necessarily always going to be the case. And the degree to which it's more difficult would be different on a team-by-team basis. It's not all just the same. So that needs to be figured out. That strength of schedule component, which is a lot of what the conversation is figuring out strength of schedule. And once that gets figured out and they can account for it, then, yeah, everybody needs to play the same number of conference games just for cleanliness.
In a game of inches, every advantage matters. Grip socks aren't just an accessory. They're a performance tool. With advanced grip technology and arch support, you can change direction faster, accelerate quicker, and stay in control. It's not just about the sock. It's about the edge it gives you. Grab Luxletic grip socks from the TikTok shop. Try them now and wonder how you ever managed without it.
Lux Sports Socks. LuxSports.co.
Everybody's just for it to be uniform across the board. Everybody plays 9. Everybody plays 3 non-cons. And if you want to go and have your Big Ten SEC scheduling arrangement and do something like that, cool. But everybody should play the same number of conference games. I'm tired of people thinking otherwise.
Yeah, 2 things. One, the SEC actually has a legit excuse. Hey, I don't want to play 9 because every other year that means that if I have Georgia and Texas on my schedule, I could also get LSU, where I didn't have them before, and I'd rather not have to deal with that crap and cost me a playoff spot if those things are not going to be factored in a way that we agree with. So I can understand their argument. Now, sometimes I think, they've got rose-colored glasses when it comes to their league too much, but the ACC's excuse is not that valid. Okay, I just picked a random school in the ACC. I picked Pitt. So their 3 non-conference games are West Virginia, which should not go away under any circumstance ever. And the other 2 that they would lose out of in this would either be Duquesne or Central Michigan. So you're telling me that if you took off Duquesne and then threw in who are they not playing, I'll just make it easy. Duke. And you put in Duke, who's a good team this year, that's going to make it so much harder for you to be better. I don't think so. I don't. In most every year of the ACC, given their history, and I'm an ACC guy, but either do 9 or convince everybody else, the Big 12 and the Big 10, to go back to 8, which the Big 12 doesn't want to do. The Big 12 wants to play 9. They're going to need to play 9. So I don't know.
They have to play 9. I mean, that's where their strength of schedule comes from in a lot of cases. There's some schools that are playing a tough non-con, but it's not enough to balance it by any means.
And here's the other thing. After the conference shuffle that went on, some teams played 10 conference games because they had non-con scheduled, and they didn't count as conference games, but you still had to stay in your conference for 10 games. And guess what? They were alive. I mean, nothing really bad happened because of that. So I think that, there's a scheduling metric that can be worked out, but the problem is that no one wants to work together on that. Truly, we're going to have Scott Docterman on the show tomorrow. He wrote an article about the Big Ten and their push for AQs. When we talk to Ralph Russo here in a second, his column today was about the SEC and Big Ten, who are supposed to be working together, that are now not. I mean,
they were all on board together. They were all on board with the automatic qualifiers and that whole setup. And then obviously there was some pushback on that. And part of the pushback was that the Big Ten said, so we're going to do this. The SEC is going to play 9 games, right? And the SEC started going, probably as a result somewhat of the blowback, perhaps not, but just the timing of it was in conjunction with some of that blowback. They said, well, I don't know. This 5-11 suddenly looks kind of good because guess who would probably benefit the most? We would. And so would the Big Ten. But I think certainly the SEC leaving a selection committee to determine 6 spots would feel pretty confident there. No, it would be with 11 spots. Mm-hmm. So there's the whole rub. That's a whole deeper conversation about the gamble by Brett Yormark on going and saying, hey, committee, we're just going to trust that amongst these 11 spots, you're going to give us 1 or 2 of these bad boys on a regular basis, as opposed to saying, we know we have 2, that no matter what. That's the gamble that he's taking. But yeah, the hang up now is the 9th conference game between the SEC and Big Ten, and the fact the SEC started going the different direction publicly last week with the 5 and then the 11 at large, and the Big Ten's like, what the hell? We are in agreement on the automatic qualifiers, and now you're talking about the other format. But had they agreed to the 9th game, then we'd already be talking about the whole automatic qualifier already being pushed forward, and that being the way we're going to do things from now on. And look, I see both sides of it. I've heard out the arguments on both sides, and I do think that Brett Yormark's taking a big gamble, but I also can appreciate whether it's the right move or not in the long run, saying, you know what, everybody's talking about how they can basically rig this thing in their favor. We're just going to go play, and we're going to let the chips fall where they may. And you know what? If they do get screwed, it's going to be known that they got screwed. BYU last year was not really the royal screwing that some made it out to be. You can make an argument they got gypped in a way, but it wasn't blatantly obvious that they had to be in the playoff or it's a farce. That wasn't the case. They were a team on the edge, a lot of other teams.
I think the best argument they have is if you're going to start arguing for these 3 SEC teams with 3 losses, BYU needs to be included in that discussion too.
Yes, but then you had Sankey's pushing Bama into the mix, even though they had an embarrassing loss, and so I don't know how that works out when you're leaving 11 spots up for a committee of people. But, the SEC and I think the Big Ten as well are also trying to change the committee. So I don't know where all that ends up in the long run. But, yeah, that 9th conference game is the big bugaboo, as we'll talk about with Ralph Russo, or the big hang-up between those 2 leagues just fully agreeing and moving on moving on to the next phase of this thing. So that's what needs to be figured out. And then the ACC obviously would need to follow suit some sort of way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's just, and I read Joe Klatt's column today where he's against the 5+11, which basically boils down to it means you put all of it on the committee.
Yes.
Which is not
other than your champion.
Yeah. And so you give 11 teams to the committee to pick now. And yeah, I mean, like they've got
versus like what it would have been 2.
Yeah.
But so the committee was picking 2 teams in a 14, right? No, they have 8, 10, 11, 12, 13. Wait, how many? There have been 12 at-larges, right? Between the 4 Power 4 conferences. Yeah. So so it had to be a 14 or 14. So you'd have had either 2 or 4 at-larges being decided by the committee versus the 5-11 where the committee is deciding 11 teams.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that they will not be so biased that they put like the 6th SEC team over a 2nd ACC team or a 2nd Big 12 team or something. And that's what you're having to hope for. And that's the gamble that Mark's taking.
But I do think
I think if there's something particularly egregious, like there will be backlash to that. I don't think they can just get away with murder and nobody react to it though.
No. And look, we've seen a backlash on there. Like last year, nothing was egregious. Nothing. I mean, the SEC's acting like it was. It wasn't egregious. The year before in the last 14 playoff was egregious. Ridiculously egregious. And
I'm just kidding.
It was I kind of knew you were going to do that. It was ridiculous.
I mean, the quarterback was hurt, Paul. I know they won every game, but the quarterback was hurt. You know?
Yeah. They won essentially 3 games after he broke his leg, but no, they can only win because of him.
But no, last year you had South Carolina who had like a minor argument they could make. Alabama had a minor argument. BYU had a minor argument. Like you had all those fighting for those last spots, and they didn't all have super convincing great arguments. They had bits and pieces.
My question for what would have been Ole Miss and South Carolina, because here's the deal. If Clemson had lost that game, Clemson was not going to go into the playoff. They stole a bid. Ole Miss still would not have been in. In that scenario, it would have been Alabama that went in. So would Lane Kiffin still be crying about this?
Oh, because it's Lane Kiffin, of course.
Yeah, but he has to understand that there was one bid up for grabs and Clemson stole it from them, and it wasn't going to him in any circumstance at all. So he was out before it started. And that's where I think you get kind of a disingenuous argument where he's thinking like, oh, we should have been in over this. Or I think he thinks he should have been over Indiana. But
well, too bad for him. He wasn't.
So
screw it. What the argument was, because we're way past that at this point. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, there were those types of things that were ongoing, various schools. I mean, I never considered Ole Miss, so that whole part that you just mentioned is not even in my memory. Now you bring it up, it is again. But I was more focused on the South Carolina run there at the end, and obviously BYU and those schools just shouldn't have lost when they lost or who they lost to, and BYU kind of had their path and they fumbled it there at the end, for example. But I mean that's the debate. You're leaving it in the hands of a committee more than you would otherwise, but the flip side of the coin, and this is where the Big 12 fans are coming in, is you don't want to be relegated to second-class citizenry, which you would be, because you're being told no matter what before the year starts, no matter how good your league may be, no matter how many good teams you might have, no matter what, you're still only getting 2 to start off with, and no matter how down another league might be, because they have more history and more everything, they're going to have double the size, and they're still going to get the benefit of the doubt in the at-larges as well. But you at least limited the at-larges, and you guaranteed yourself 2 spots. Now you're opening it up, 11 spots for a committee, and you're only guaranteed 1 spot. So that's a hell of a gamble, and that's why last week I was just like, I don't know, man. Like, the 2 spots sounds kind of nice, but it's less about that automatics and all that, and I think it's just the perception. That's the driving force for your mark and the fandom. And I think I've seen enough Big 12 fans now to say that pretty confidently, that it's probably a worse draw. Very well may be. But at some point, you got to go out there and earn these spots, and that's up to the teams to go and do that. And then if you get royally screwed over, well, then that'll be made public, and that'll be out there for everybody to see, and there will be ramifications for that. But you got to go make that an issue first. And if you're all sitting there with 3-4 losses, well, then you don't have an argument, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to bet on yourself. That's what they're doing. And we'll see in the long run whether that was the right gamble or not.